Hi, welcome to T-Minus Retirement, the podcast where we help launch your retirement to orbit. I'm Jay Cole.
I'm Dustin Watts.
And joining us today is Brian Owen, another member of our team here at Team Wealth and Tax Advisors. This episode is going to be a little bit different. I'm sure you can tell. We're coming to you live from our separate backyards, and we essentially had just I wouldn't say minor, it was more of a major power outage, and so causing us just to disrupt business a little bit. And so rather than just shutting things down completely and saying, okay, we're not going to work today, we decided to adapt to that. And that got us thinking, how do we plan for those unexpected events when it comes to your financial aspect? And so we just thought this would be kind of a good timely video just to bring up those few examples and then how best to weather them out.
Absolutely. So I know a lot of times when we're doing financial plans, we kind of we have a base case financial planning scenario where we have all the things that we want to do, but also we can build in some contingencies. And one of the contingencies, even that we build in for our day-to-day business is, what do we do if the power goes out, right? Where do we work? How do we work? And so we have those things ironed out to where we can pretty much conduct business from anywhere, like Jay was saying. And so right now we're all at our homes and business as usual, but the same thing applies to a financial plan. And that's just really what we wanted to talk about today is what happens if, for example, you get laid off earlier than you were planning on retiring. What can you do? What are things maybe you don't want to do, as far as get laid off or something like that, and you panic? What are some things you don't want to do, and kind of how do you address that situation?
Yeah. And then also just what are some prudent steps you can take beforehand to help maybe avoid these situations that they do come up, avoid it going sour quickly?
So Jay, we were talking before recording here on some ideas on what would you say are some things that we don't want to do if something unexpected happens, and we're kind of in that panic mode. Let's just say we get laid off and we're like, oh my gosh, I got the mortgage due, I got all these things happening. Before we kind of take a breath and assess the situation, sometimes people panic. What are some things that we don't want to do in a situation like that?
Yeah, we don't want to go, I think you coined this term earlier, we don't want to go the nuclear route where we decide to cash out everything. So cash out your 401k, cash out maybe any pensions that you might have, any stocks or rental properties, you sell all that. You don't want to do that immediately. Obviously, that's going to trigger such a huge tax burden, and you might not be able to have enough to pay the tax on that. Or that might just wipe out almost half of all of that, and now you're kind of back to square one. So we definitely don't want to do that. Another thing too is we don't necessarily want to panic and start any pensions or Social Security early. Just it's good to just you mentioned it earlier, stop and assess the situation and essentially kind of take a breath, because you don't want to trigger a pension that, if you end up finding another job, well, now you have this pension that if you would have waited a bit longer, that you could have been getting more. Same with Social Security. Now you're paying taxes on those benefits when you don't necessarily need them at the moment. So you don't want to do that. And like I mentioned, if you had any rental properties or any investments that do have a large capital gain, we don't want to just cause an immediate sell-off or sell these properties just yet, because, again, that could wipe out half of its value just when it comes to taxes.
So probably the first, real quick, the best thing to do is have some contingencies in place before an event like that happens, right? And when we build out a financial plan, it's like, it may seem a little silly, but having some of that emergency money, we want to have some money off to the side that is not in the stock market, that's really not subject to any risk, that we can get access to in this kind of event. That's number one. We want to be able to pay some bills, without having to disrupt things for a few months at least.
And real quick, just with that emergency fund, a good rule of thumb is at least 3 months. I tend to like more 6 months, especially
Yeah,
if you
me
have
too.
more expenses like mortgage, car payments, things like that. It's probably good just to have a good 6 month buffer, and that
Yeah.
allows you some little extra breathing room in case something like that does happen. You don't have to stress immediately about it.
Yeah, you bring up a great point there, and that's the 3 month was the common conventional wisdom we all heard about. But then, yeah, I would agree with you guys. Both 6 months is, I think, much more comfortable given the age we're in, especially when you're trying to plan kind of a contingency around those unexpected events in life.
Hmm.
So if something like that happens, let's say, you get laid off, it's earlier than you maybe wanted to retire. And honestly, this has happened, I think, to clients of all of ours, because it does happen. Sometimes you're at the mercy of an employer, right? And things get downsized or what have you. And what you want to do, first of all, is, kind of hit the ground running on getting those resumes out there. Let's try to get some work as
Yeah.
quickly as we can, because we can kind of fall back on our financial plan. And if we can go back to what our desired retirement age is and all these different things, that's obviously plan A, because that allows us to pick back up where we started. Yes, maybe you're not working for the same employer, but we can get some income back going. We can continue, any type of retirement savings with as little disruption as possible. And that's always the preferred route. But if that isn't possible, maybe you're out of work for a couple of months and go through that that emergency savings. What are some ideas that we can think of that we can maybe extend if we're in a situation like that we can kind of bridge that gap until we do find work?
Well, I think there's always going to be a job out there. You might have to take a pay cut or just do something that's temporary.
Yeah.
But I think it, it might it might be a shot to your pride, but just view it as okay, you have this temporary job. Maybe it's at Lowe's or Home Depot or Walmart or whatever the case is. And it does not sound ideal, but at least kind of get some income coming in. I think that's a good thing to do if you're kind of hitting a wall on trying to find new employment.
Yeah, and it's a good point because most of the time in those years where we're working, we're building the career, we're doing what we want to do. It's our spending, our budgeting is in line with income like that. And when we have to, Jay, like you're saying, when you take a pay cut, you have to, not treat it like a shock to the savings account initially.
Yeah, yeah. I think too revalue or re adjusting what your budget is and maybe trimming off expenses that are just unnecessary. So
Yeah.
maybe you have to cancel some of those streaming subscriptions, or maybe you decide
Yeah.
you can't, go out to eat for the next couple months. It's a sacrifice, but it's one that's ultimately worth it at the end of the day.
Yeah, give up the taco shop for a couple months.
Yeah.
Well, and we talk about that all the time. And, budgeting and what you're spending is honestly the biggest thing that you have control over. So
Mhm.
if you're already at least living on your budget and you have things written down, you can easily, in a scenario like that, go to the budget and say, okay, yeah, I got to cancel HBO Max, and I got to cancel, a couple of these just luxuries, so to speak, and then kind of, get down to some bare minimums that will help get you by. I think that's, definitely a good advice. But, over and above that, if it was like really worst case scenario, and this is like a protracted, unemployment situation, which we hope that doesn't happen, of course, because that is definitely detrimental. But if we kind of go back to the accounts that we've set up, we have some retirement savings, maybe we have some after-tax savings. We want to have, in an ideal situation, some accounts that we can tap into, preferably without penalty, without really too much tax burden. We want to have some accounts that we can access, maybe prematurely in a emergency type of situation,
Yeah.
that can help get us through. So a couple of those accounts that would work, we would want to go to a brokerage account, a non-qualified, I'll just call it non-retirement type of account first. something that we're not paying ordinary income tax on, something that we're not having to pay penalties on. Maybe we just have to deal with some capital gains. We can kind of pick and choose where we're taking money off of, our money from. That definitely can help bridge some gaps. Get us, buy us a couple of extra months. Over and above that, there are options. Roth accounts have some features to them that you can take, basically what you put into it without any major penalties. We can kind of go down the list, but I would say those are, maybe two to consider if like it's worst case, we have to get through longer than we expected without unemployment or something like that.
Yeah, and this is where it's good to have a plan, because if, let's say you're 62 and you do get laid off and you weren't planning on retiring just yet, if the only option is to start Social Security, we can at least see how it looks like in the plan. And again, if you need to make some budget changes just to make it run smoothly, well, you have that peace of mind that the plan kind of helps back up that decision to do so.
Yeah.
That's a very good point, because as we relate having a good solid financial plan to a contingency plan, it's here we start the day off, there's no power. What are our choices? Well, gee, we could either decide to not answer the phone or service clients, or it's like, no, we already had that plan in place where we could operate remotely, and we can continue business as usual and not let it skip a beat. And so it's having that financial plan revisited, adjusted. That's absolutely essential.
Well, and that's a really good point that you mentioned, Brian, because part of a financial plan is it's building out options for you, right? It's like, you have these 401k accounts, you have these after-tax accounts, maybe Roth accounts. It's basically building optionality into your life, because I jokingly say, one thing that is certain is not everything goes according to plan, and you want options. You want enough flexibility to make changes and adjustments as life goes on, as things come up that you hope that they don't happen, but sometimes they do. And building in enough optionality really gets you through those periods of time that that everything doesn't go according to plan.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think one final note too, a lot of times when you get laid off, the company might offer a severance. I would say if you're fans of The Office, don't take the Stanley Hudson approach and just, do nothing or just be on vacation, just using up all that severance. Use that to your advantage. Use that to help bridge that gap for finding the next job, or for getting you prepared for retirement if that's the case. But it's good to be prudent with every resource and asset that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. It's and it's kind of goes without saying, but if you don't have a financial plan, you need to get a financial plan, and you need to work with a financial professional to do that.
Yeah, because that's crucial, because they can help guide you. We can help guide clients if something like that happens to them. We can at least go to their financial plan and say, okay, what options do we have available? Just like you were saying, early this morning, Brian. Okay, what options do we have available? We come in, the power doesn't work. How can we continue our day-to-day business? It's the same thing with your financial life. Okay, something happens that you hope doesn't happen, but it happened. What options do we have to get through, now until we kind of get back on track? And having enough options is crucial.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, we hope that this conversation you found valuable and some insight. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us, but we appreciate your time, and we look forward to seeing everybody in the next video.
Yes.
Yep, take care. Guys.